All right, everybody, we're going back to judging some debates. I was one of the assigned judges for this debate, so I'm going to give it a good old try. Happy Easter to everybody. God bless. He has risen, and let's get this started. So the topic for the debate is on balance, Turkey's continued membership is beneficial to the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. So let's go to the judging panel. So BOP is not expressly shared. So I will assume that Pro has the burden of proof. That's just normal debate rules. Unless it's said otherwise. I hope that it isn't said otherwise because burden of proof's burden of proof. I am slightly pro on the topic. Why? Well, I believe that Turkey, of course, has the Bosphorus Strait to offer. And that's very important for international trade. So, of course, having Turkey aligned with NATO basically cements that NATO will have at least an increased chance to have access to the Bosphorus. But I would say that there's some issues with Greece, right? Especially with how they recognize international waters with certain resource disputes off the Greek coast that are supposed to actually belong to Greece that Turkey doesn't necessarily like. And some conflicts on their border that has NATO have their panties a bit in the bunch. I think that there is pros and cons, but I think that just based off of the stance of international trade, it's better for NATO if Turkey stayed aligned with them. So the descriptions are very simple. To make this a 3-round debate, I will waive my first round and allow Pro to go first. Pro should waive their last round. This way we have three speeches. There we go. All right. So let's go ahead and get this started. Sorry, here, let me move my mic a bit. Okay, there we go. Sorry, I forgot to do this earlier. Waive per the rules. Okay, semantics. Turkey. It is nationalistically known as Turkey. I cannot pronounce that because I don't speak Turkish. But for this debate, it's spelled the Anglo-English way. Okay, come on. Do you honestly, think that Blonde Monkey was gonna argue about an animal turkey that's just fucking whatever sound they make, just random turkey noises, and we have them inside of NATO. I don't think you would have. Republic in West Asia and Southeastern Europe. Between the Black Sea, the Mediterranean, the Aegean, the center of the Ottoman Empire, became a republic in 1923. Ah, yes, when the Islamic world repeatedly cried. NATO, North Atlantic Treaty Organization. The NATO alliance consists of 30 member states from North America and Europe. Article 5 of the treaty states that if an armed attack occurs against one of the member states, it should be considered an attack against all members, and other members shall assist the attacked member with armed forces if necessary. Beneficial, producing good results or helpful effects. Framework. Pro states that beneficial is fundamentally digital. That even the balance in the topic's resolution is to be ignored until Con provides a means to quantify and balance otherwise. This means that if Pro can initially prove a good result or a helpful effect for Turkey towards NATO, then Con has to first provide the means of quantifying it. Let me just on balance, Turkey is beneficial to NATO. Okay, so it's not is it beneficial to Turkey? It's beneficial to NATO. Okay. Has to first provide the means for quantifying it, to then claim it has been outweighed by either the negatives attached or somehow quantify the attached negatives as a countermeasure. This means Pro is upholding the on balance while declining the means to quantity. To quantity, you mean quantify? I'm going to put that as a grammar mistake because that made me double take. All right. Okay, just to explain this real quick. So key arguments, these are what I would like to call burden of proof arguments. These are debate winning. So if there was something like, life begins at conception, and they made a case to explain why it does, and that's debate winning. If they have the burden of proof, and if they don't, if they lack the burden of proof, then it's important for them to refute that, right? If they refute that, well then chances are they're going to win the debate, right? Solid arguments are, arguments that may not necessarily be completely attached to the burden of proof and to the topic itself, but provide like necessary supporting information or like very relevant. And this is also when people do not have a concrete burden of proof. Moderate arguments are, well, the argument's, relatively important, but it's not necessarily exactly having to do with the topic. When, maybe it provides like an important framework. And minor arguments are near inconsequential, but it has something to do with the topic. So, for instance, if we were arguing gay marriage and you're saying that homosexuals on average are, let's just say, more promiscuous than average, then you would have to go ahead and explain why that would go along with why they shouldn't be allowed to marry, right? So that would be a minor argument that could lead into a moderate or solid argument, right? Conduct is essentially if I see like any outright disses, I will give the person who initiated the diss a point. The one with the most points loses. Spelling and grammar, same thing. Whenever there's any type of grammar issues, I'll give a point. Any type of grammar error that makes me double take or makes me think back and not just minor errors, the person who committed the error is going to get a point. The one with the most points loses. Sources, if I have to review their sources to make sure it's saying what they're saying and it doesn't say what they're saying, or they simply like make a statement that's way too bold without a source, I will mark a point on whoever has done that, and whoever has the most points loses. So let me just see what type of judging style it is. Is it a winner selection? Okay, so that doesn't really matter. I guess I will have it balanced evenly when it comes to who wins what. We'll come out with a format for that. So let's continue. Where are we? All right, right here. Winning over a potential permanent enemy of Europe. Without Turkey being a member state of NATO, Europe has a guaranteed enemy primarily via Greece relations, but due to much more. Why does this matter? Well, would NATO rather Turkey felt closer to Russia, the Middle East, or Europe? What Pro wishes to highlight here is that T has so much negative potential towards Europe and thus NATO. If it wasn't recruited to NATO back in 1952 through to today in 2023, note that 1949 is when NATO formed. I'll just say Turkey. Turkey is the level just below original member state. Imagine it never joined NATO for a moment. Imagine it stuck to Middle East alliances and/or alliances with Russia alone. This not only would affect Turkey, but incentivize other Eastern European nations to back Russia's domain instead of NATO/Europe, such as Ukraine, which has suffered dire consequences for even suggesting to join NATO, according to Putin's original narrative. As much as Pro predicts Khan will bring negativity, since Turkey has had issues with Greece, the very fact NATO has perpetually been there as a negotiating liaison beyond the passive approach the UN takes is immensely important. Turkey, as much as it resents Greece, cannot act against Greece in an overtly aggressive political or especially militaristic manner, because not only are both members of NATO, but both joined in the same month of 1952. Wait, didn't they have a war over the islands? Turkey, Greece, war, islands. The Asian dispute. Okay. The Turkish relations since twice led to crisis, military hostilities in 1987 and 1996. Okay, technically I can't bring outside knowledge in the debate, but if he brings this up, that's a very strong rebuttal. Okay. But both, okay, the long and short of it. Oh, these are hyperlinks. Got you. Sounding Putin's narrative about Ukraine as a master key to this crisis. Search? No, not bookmark. Search. NATO. NATO's expansion. Okay. I mean, Putin's right in my opinion. Both joined in the same month. Long and short of it. I like that they even provided a hyperlink for that. Alright. Then while NATO, of course, has massively benefited Turkey, and while, yes, Turkey's issues with certain European nations, especially Greece, exist, to suggest Turkey hasn't contributed or played ball is a mistake, first and foremost, because of how much it's held back elsewhere, consistently loyal and true to NATO from the very start of its now 71-year alliance. The very tensions cons may allude to are all actually evidence of benefits of Turkey being part of NATO, as of course, since Turkey joined alongside Greece, other nations were incentivized to join along with them. Right? I'd say that's a pretty key argument. If you can prove that, that's huge. We will go ahead and put this. All right. Other nations. Okay, Turkey was the level just below original, directly by tier 1 only. Greece and Turkey, Germany, Spain, Czechia, Hungary, and Poland, Bulgaria, Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, Romania, Slovakia, Slovenia, Albania, Croatia, Montenegro, and North Macedonia, NATO.int. This was the order that the nations, after the original 12 in 1949, joined NATO. If Turkey hadn't joined, it was certainly very unlikely Greece would, given the very rivalry spoken about. Greece would maybe do so, but Turkey joining meant both could join NATO to ensure protection against the other, etc. To the surprise of many reading, the nations that joined afterwards may indeed surprise you in some ways, but the key aspect being that the Eastern Euro nations joined in a cluster in 2004, and then sort of mid to east, once like Poland and Hungary joined in 1999, tells you something is true about what I suggested. T led the way. Had Turkey and Greece not truly dedicated to some form of peace and joined NATO together and proven how good NATO can maintain said peace, the only incentive to join NATO would be defense against an outer threat. But if then Russia shows up and Turkey and Greece instead used Russia as their buffer, I think you see just how significantly negative to NATO a snowball effect was. Counteracted. That's weirdly, but I won't give you off on grammar because I don't really know how else I'd word that personally. Turkey and Greece being there was a clear-cut proof example, an example to the rest of Europe that wasn't in the West to rethink their options of only succumbing to Russia and genuinely seek an alternative. I'm not denying that Turkey joined NATO originally out of fear of Russia, but it joined with Greece together for a very specific reason, as an implied promise of peace due to a rivalry beyond just seeking safety from the USSR. Let's just clarify what Turkey quite literally contributes to NATO. Believe it or not, from day one, Turkey's involvement was paranormal. It will shock those who don't know about it. The Cold War could have been much, much tougher to win had Turkey itself not sided with NATO against the USSR. That is very true. To this date, it has its second largest enemy and is the host of the Allied Land Command headquarters. The Encircle and Konya air bases have both been involved in several NATO military operations since their establishment. Oh, okay. Let's take a look. Oh, okay. Well, that just brings us to NATO. Okay, that just brings us to Wikipedia. Both Wikipedia pages. Okay, wikipedia.org. Note that the Army is just one branch of the military. That said, it is a branch that matters very much for online warfare and security. If NATO were to go to war ever, this meant theoretically and even practically, since it has actual bases to attack out of that, Turkey would be risking the second most direct bodies on land out of all the 30 member states. The fear of that alone is part of the security NATO provided and has done since the start. Let's be crystal clear here. From the beginning of Turkey's membership, it was actively siding with NATO against the USSR. This was extremely important. It was not a passive membership or option. It is also important to understand why this recent fiasco of Turkey negotiating with Russia at all occurred and where the strain is. Turkey is in no shape or form has been a minimalistic member of NATO and contribution. Okay. Geographically, NATO and the EU would be finding trade much more difficult. Yep, there we go. With both the Middle East, Russia, and even the Mediterranean nation if Turkey wasn't loyal to NATO. It is actually crucial to realize that Turkey's loyalty to NATO is only to NATO, however, because of how early it joined and because it takes that seriously. It has offered so many trade route benefits and security to the EU, which shares many member states with NATO throughout the decades. I'm not sure what to prove here, as the very geography of it should make it obvious that if it wasn't in NATO, what? I am not sure what to prove here, as the very geography of it should make it obvious that if it wasn't in NATO... What? Okay, let me reread the previous sentence. Nah, it's just bad grammar. All right. Turkey is the EU's sixth biggest trade partner, representing 3.3% of the EU's total trade in goods with the world. Imports and exports combined, that's pretty big. The EU is by far Turkey's biggest, largest merchandise import and export partner in 2022. In 2022, 26% of Turkey's good imports came from the EU, and 41% of the country's good exports went to the EU. All right, these are pretty major arguments. So I'm going to call this the Cold War and the economic argument, pretty much. So we have three main arguments from what I'm seeing. We're having the peace argument. We are having the economic argument. And we are also having the whatchamacallit. What did I just say? The Cold War argument, I would say. Like, yeah. I just had good names for it. Why did I fuck that? But okay, they had the they had the foreign policy argument, you know, when it came to, we'll just call it that, with Greece. They had the economic argument down here, and then they had the Cold War argument right about here. All right, fair enough. I'll call it the diplomatic argument because technically it still extends. He's still extending it to the modern day, saying that if Russia, you know, there'd be war. So those would be three main arguments that I would go ahead and say. All right. I'm not going to delve heavily into that, but I do assert that an objective fact that if Turkey was outside of NATO, it would have more friction with the EU, not just NATO. The frictionless trading routes being made available, an active, direct, and middleman trade role Turkey is playing between Euro nations and surrounding areas is something that would not be happening as smoothly if Turkey felt it needed to side more with Russia or the Middle East for its security needs. Just want to clarify how contributed it has been militaristically thus far. I just want to clarify how contributed. What? How much it has contributed militaristically thus far, I think is what you meant to say. With 70 years under its belt, Turkey is among NATO's older members. It boasts a strong legacy, having been a bulwark against communism during the Cold War and a frontier player in many regional crises that erupted later, including the South Caucasus, Balkans, Iraq, and most recently Syria. In contrast to most other alliance members, its incessant state of conflict around its borders has denied Turkey any peace dividend. Turkey's formidable military capacity and growing expeditionary capabilities, together with its expanding defense industry, particularly in drone technologies, are all critical enablers for NATO. Even as priorities change and global attention shifts to the east, Russia's invasion of Ukraine has proven that building on sustainable security in the Euro-Atlantic area is unfinished business. Much to the delight of Turkish officials, this is corroborated Ankara's continuing geopolitical relevance, something it is betting on, maybe excessively so, in making demands of Finland and Sweden. You almost couldn't even imagine recent world history had Turkey not been a part of NATO. It's been a silent, devoted ally. All right, very good arguments. I think all of those were good, strong arguments. I am going to take a sip of water because my throat's already getting dry. Already almost done with the gallon. All right. One moment. Let me just do this. Does the mute button? And we are back. All right, framework. Now we're going to get to cons. NATO's 2022 strategic concept commits NATO to international peace far beyond the borders of the 30 member nations. NATO and the UN often link their operations, providing humanitarian aid in Pakistan and Ghana, two countries that are not in NATO. Above all, NATO supports the protection of international life. Doing so is not just good for international security, since displaced persons, terrorist attacks, and refugee crises pose existential security threats to NATO members' nations. But fulfilling this principle of protecting international life also gels with NATO's longstanding support of liberal democratic values. Disgusting. Any other framework that limits the assessment of the resolution of geopolitics, security of third nations, etc., misses the humanitarian role played by NATO in risk prioritizing the nation state over the well-being of people outside the nation state. I'm a nationalist, so that argument's not going to really do too well. As such, I contend that if Khan can show that more life is threatened or qualitatively worse than Turkey's continued membership in NATO, judges should feel comfortable voting Khan. Turkey's activity in northern Syria. Turkey is a major recipient of military assistance from NATO states. member states. Okay, however, instead of pursuing geopolitical objectives in line with NATO's goal of establishing international peace, Turkey's government uses this assistance to invade northern Syria, displacing and killing thousands of civilians and starting an ethnic cleansing campaign. That's a bit weird. I honestly thought that you would go some other way with that argument, but so far, Pro has an easy way to defeat that argument. In 2018, Turkey's military and its proxy, the SNA, which it funds and directs, armed with German tanks, British helicopters, and supplied with military intel from years of fighting in Syria together with the NATO. Okay, that actually works, invaded the northern city of Afrin, potentially displacing 100,000 Kurdish civilians and using rape, torture, and killing as strategies of inflicting terror on the Kurdish population. Turkey is seen as the Kurds. I don't think this guy really knows a lot about the risk that the Kurds uniting poses to the, to the Arabian Peninsula, but, we can't bring any outside information in this debate. Imperialists. Okay, how about this? Rape. Portably employed rape. Torture. Okay. So his source goes up. Okay. In 2019, then President Trump removed American troops from northern Syria, allowing Turkey to encroach yet again on Syria's territory. Okay. 2019, then President Trump removed American troops from northern Syria, allowing Turkey to encroach yet again on Syria. Okay, blah, blah, blah. Both incursions are commensurate with Turkey's long-standing goal of eliminating terror, that is, preventing the recognition of the Kurdish state, killing the YPG, PYD, and SDF. Who have had much success in battling ISIS. Let's take a look at that. Okay. The abandonment of Kurdish who have been considered one of the best fighters against ISIS, Syria, and Iraq. Voiced fears would increase the risk that ISIS. Ooh, okay, that's big. All right. Both incursions are commensurate with Turkey's long-standing goal of eliminating terror, that is, preventing the recognition of the Kurdish state, okay, blah, 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 domestically, quashing the Kurdistan Worker Party, who are allegedly connected with the YPG and PYD, though this connection is overstated by Erdogan. Since October 2019, over 200 civilian casualties were attributed to Turkey's most recent invasion. It's not much, which includes 18 children. That's just a fact of war, man. Summary executions, torture, and even an assassination of a political figure played out in Turkey's ironically named safe zone in northern Syria. What's more, the expropriation of property and killing of civilians targeted Kurds with laser precision. You say 11 to 12. Okay, harassment, okay, seizures, rape, sexual violence against detainees, 29. Okay. He is putting up the sources, that is for sure. President Erdogan told Turkey's state-sanctioned press that the Kurdish people were not designed to live in the safe zone area. The people most suitable for that area are the Arabs. These areas are not suitable for the lifestyle of the Kurds. In Afrin and northern Syria more broadly, Turkey has repopulated areas that were predominantly Kurdish with Arab Syrian refugees and barred displaced Kurds from returning to their homes. It's taking too long to load. Okay. Turkey's aggressive campaign of terror has reduced Afrin's Kurdish population from 97% to 35%. A report from the European University Institute in 2021 found that Turkey's provision of basic services to occupied cities in northern Syria, example, critical infrastructure, water, etc., was conditional on a low percent of Kurds living in these cities. As mentioned previously, weapons made by NATO members were used to invade northern Syria. More alarmingly, in Turkey's successful use of its status as NATO's linchpin as a bargaining chip. Most recently, it threatened to veto Sweden and Finland's induction to NATO until both countries extradited alleged PKK followers and lifted their arms embargoes, the latter of which Sweden did. In fact, Sweden, Finland, and Turkey signed a trilateral memorandum that ceded to Turkish demands, extraditing alleged PKK members, while ensuring a clear path for Sweden and Finland to accede to NATO. Former Turkish diplomat remarked that the calculus of Ankara is that the West needs Turkey on board with NATO enlargement, and therefore there will be less criticism of Turkey's cross-border operation. That's so smart. By making itself seem indispensable to the West, Turkey hopes to continue to woo NATO members to support its genocidal activities in northern Syria. At the same time, Turkey has doubled trade with Russia and sought Russian military missile systems during Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Turkey isn't in NATO for the sake of collective security. Turkey is in NATO to accomplish its geopolitical goals, and it does so through a complex balancing act, paying allies off against other allies to increase its land holdings in northern Syria. For more recent evidence, consider Turkey intelligence sharing in coordination with ISIS accumulated in Hasaka prison riot, propagating internal discord for 10 days. Turkey's support for ISIS is nothing new. Some evidence suggests that Turkey went as far as bribing and converting ISIS members to the Free Assyrian Army, a proxy militia funded and directed by Turkey, to continue Turkey's fight against the YPG. Turkey's national intelligence also has direct and cordial ties with Al-Qaeda. Ooh, that's big. This guy did a lot of research. I gotta give him credit. Like, he's really trying in this debate. Outside of direct support, Turkey's most recent incursion into Syria has inadvertently allowed nearly 900 ISIS prisoners. Oof. So I would say that there goes the peacekeeping argument, especially if it brings up the Greek conflict. If he doesn't, well, then you can probably easily win that back. Given NATO's complicity in providing weaponry and military training that bolstered Turkey's military strength vis-a-vis the Kurds, facilitating a genocide, and B, allowing, I think that's a bit far, allowing Turkey to use its position as a NATO member to demand changes to other countries' arms export policies while directly undermining key NATO operations by supporting ISIS. It must be stated that NATO does not benefit from Turkey's membership, and ISIS resurgence means a deteriorating security situation in the Middle East, more refugee crisis, and thanks to Turkey's meddling, NATO losing a key player in the perennial war on terror. A genocide does the same thing, and it goes against the values of security, but also humanitarian principle that NATO supports. Hence, a con ballot is called for on the Pro's case. Okay, this is going to be interesting. Winning over potential enemies to Europe. Pro posits that Turkey's inclusion in NATO aligns Turkey with Europe rather than the Middle East or Russia. He furthers that Turkey incentivized other countries to join NATO, and that Turkey joined NATO in a bid for protection against Greece, as evidenced by both countries joining in the same month in 1952. Since Turkey could prove a formidable foe, it is better for Turkey to be a friend, averse pro. The problem with this argument is that it is primarily historical. Even if I buy that Turkey's inclusion in NATO served the historic purpose of protecting Turkey vis-a-vis Greece, the resolution asks whether Turkey's continued membership is beneficial. So how well does NATO protect Greece and Turkey from their mutual animosity? Not well. As recently as 2020, confrontation in the Eastern Mediterranean led Greece to increase its naval and air equipment in an act of brinkmanship. Both countries have escalated conflict, such as Greek and Turkish frigates were often involved in a collision in contested waters. Further, NATO member nations could take sides with Greece or Turkey, thereby inflaming tensions. In fact, France has in 1974, when Turkey and Greece came to blows over the Turkish invasion of Cyprus. It was the U.S., not NATO, as an organization, that imposed a ceasefire. Pro needs airtight evidence that NATO can contain the potential for war well into the future. There we go. Yep. Second turned Pro's argument on increasing NATO. Second turned Pro's argument on increasing NATO membership, while Turkey's continued membership will have little, if any, influence on Eastern European countries' membership into NATO. Turkey's continued membership does mean it can veto Finland's and Sweden's membership. If more countries in NATO is meant to deter Russian aggression, then Turkey is impeding a stronger NATO. What Turkey brings to the table. Pro argues that Turkey's army, air bases, and geographic location are advantageous to NATO, and that continued membership means that NATO member countries are wealthier from trade and better protected from Turkey's superior military. First, Turkey's military was severely weakened due to Erdogan's purges of military officials. In total, 21,000 military officials were expelled from Turkey's military, including hundreds of pilots who comprised Turkey's hitherto prestigious air force and nearly half of Turkey's generals. They do possess an abundance of advanced weaponry, but this is mostly due to support from NATO member countries. Second, Turkey uses its linchpin status as a method of expediting the genocide in northern Syria by playing off an ally that can reap advanced military technology, coerce Western countries into getting rid of their arm embargoes, and still get support from Russia and China. In fact, the Incirlik base was the Incirlik base airbase was expressly used for this purpose, coercing the West numerous times, including the 1974 invasion of Cyprus. Before 2003, Turkey wanted the capacity to veto any American flight taking off from their airbase. More recently, President Erdogan shut off power to the base after the 2016 coup attempt, which some saw as Turkey's attempt to demonstrate its power over Washington's foreign policy. Third, Turkey's trade with the EU may not be conditional on NATO membership. Turkey's essentially the EU, at least, was blocked in 2019, but Turkey is still a major trade partner. What would NATO, whose mission is primarily related to human security, have to do with trade relations? I have more to say, but I'm limited by space. Vote con. Yeah, he's going to need to get more into the other points. From what I'm seeing, he's addressed two of the main points, which is, the historic status and, the necessity based off of that. And the Greek threat to Turkey and the Turkish threat to Greece, but they didn't really attack the economic point so far. So let's go ahead and see if Rational Madman can keep up the lead, because right now he is in the lead. All right. Turkey is NATO. Khan's framework is disrespectful and futile. When Khan forms his framework, he frames it with two similar flaws. When seeing NATO kicking T out, he separates T from NATO, ignores the fact that they're 71-year heavily militaristically and economically contributive symbiotic member throughout. In other words, he separates Turkey from NATO, and analyzing benefit and cost analysis. Turkey is literally part of the collective that is NATO. That entire part loses out if Turkey is kicked out, and it does matter, but I'll get to why later. When seeing threats and qualitative issues, suddenly Khan again separates the idea that Turkey is part of NATO, meaning if T has qualitative issues or threats, that becomes more severe if NATO kicks it out. Every part of that and what it results in is conveniently ignored and scapegoated by Khan. NATO has a loyalty and responsibility to Turkey, just as Turkey has to NATO. What Khan is fundamentally doing is similar to what abusive parents, bosses, or really any authoritative figurehead or popular people in a group do. They isolate the victim, make them feel everything they do is not good enough, and gaslight them to believe they're insane for feeling hard done by. Why this is important is that Khan ignores any reason Turkey may have chosen to do certain things with Syria, Russia, or anybody at all, and yet if the US and UK kill between 280,771 and 315,190 Iraqis, two sources, and which can only be described as an egotistical genocide. You mean an egotistical genocide? I'll let that slide. An intentionally wild war that puts the whole of NATO at risk of retaliation if Russia and China actively sided with Iraq based on a paranoid hunch that may well have masked Bush's grudge against his own father. Turkey keeps its head down, plays its part, and helps out, despite perhaps very well thinking otherwise, considering how geographically close it is to Iraq and the risks involved. From day one, Turkey helped the U.S. and its self-centered venture to blackmail the USSR to succumb to capitalism and win in the Cold War. It respected its allies' needs and wants, every single one, even Greece, that it had a deep rivalry with. Turkey is NATO, in every sense of the word. It paid its damn dues and put blood, sweat, and tears into earning its place on the table. The framework Khan's offers is of no difference to an abusive parent disowning their child because they think they and others in the family are oh so perfect, leaving that child not only out of the relations while alive, but out of the will too. Despite the child having tried their best, it is disrespectful, outrageously disloyal, and more importantly, it is strategically suicidal. Remember, I just said this. Turkey is literally part of the collective that is NATO. That entire part of T is kicked out, and this does matter, but I'll get to why later. T is a 71-year-old loyal, nearly original member of NATO. It's spearheaded what it meant to join NATO. it led the way for others to weigh the odds easier. Imagine if you stuck your middle finger up to any nation that happened to not be in the social in crowd of a crew it had put longer than at least half of its members. You had just told every single other member that they are trash that can be discarded. And what's important is to note that NATO has readily served the greedy, egotistical agenda of the US, UK, and other original members, and Turkey played its part all the way through. This is going to be a really terrible precedent. I reject the framework Khan offers and reject almost Khan's entire case based on this. That was a really good argument. Like, that was solid from Rational Madman. That was a really good argument. I'm going to put that, here, wait, I actually did that. Let me go ahead and put this, refuting that solid argument. Like, that was good. That was really strong, in my opinion. The controlled beast versus the untamed monster. Let's take Khan's entire case at face value and ignore what I just said for a moment. Khan's overall case seems to be that if you have a member of your crew, family, and or business that feels neglected and is reconsidering its interest, that the best approach is to ditch them. Nothing could be more unforgivably strategically flawed. This is exactly how to incentivize Turkey to side with Russia, the Middle East, and China against the entire NATO, and they wouldn't just do it quietly. They'd feel bloodlust level of vengeance, considering they were such a loyal, contributive member. In fact, every single war that NATO nations ever were in so far benefited the agenda of the US, UK, and Western Europe far more than Turkey. Every single war so far has been detrimental to Turkey in some ways, but Turkey saw the bigger picture. It understood that the guarantee of a long-term protection from Russia, foremost, and other nations, too, was worth it. The U.S. is allied to Israel, a nation that has committed potentially the most war crimes on Earth in the past 20 years. Oh, he's based. It is literally militaristically assisting its ability to withstand the vengeance of the Middle East upon it for what they see as unforgivable sins. Israel is not a member of NATO. I am not here denying the war crimes of the US and UK during Afghanistan, Iraq, and more, including the original Vietnam War. That was a final part of the Cold War US dragged T into. I am saying that T didn't guilt trip US and UK about it, didn't betray NATO in any way. It helped them, it stood by its allies, and kept its own agenda and thoughts to itself, as it understood what it means to be a team player. Why this is important? I'll ignore it one more time, but if this becomes a trend, I'm going to start marking points off. Isn't just to emphasize with T, Turkey, and morally feel loyal. It is to understand that Turkey indeed plays ball. It helps. It stands down and knows it's not the only agenda to play at play in NATO. While in NATO, it's the second largest army in it, helping with droid warfare in modern times and more boots on the ground warfare before. So it's extremely easy for find situations where Turkey's own agenda is not in line with NATO's, but this is only true if we forget that Turkey has always been in a different position, overlooked and trodden upon thus far. Turkey is tired of it. It sees a way to get more out of Sweden and Finland before they join NATO. It sees that finally it maybe can get its own slice of the pie. So this doesn't mean that others in NATO need to instantly cave into the demands of Turkey. But it does mean that they should patiently listen, discuss, and negotiate with one of their oldest members. If Turkey is kicked out simply for having an agenda of its own, or being a bit of a wild card in some situations, all Khan has had NATO do is screw itself over. They just send a worldwide signal that not only will they not negotiate, but they will in fact perhaps negotiate against the interest of older, loyal members, such as Turkey, if they make demands from brand new prospects, namely Sweden and Finland. This is strategically ridiculous and has only incentivized Turkey to now be a new leader yet again and spearhead a movement in nations on the fence to side against NATO instead of with it. Why so vaguely structured? I do not feel the need to address Khan's point one by one. Voters, you need to see what Khan is doing is misleading you. I am not going to give you a point-by-point debacle of Khan that Khan wants this to become. I am hitting home core concepts. It is vital you understand how Khan is misleading you. He's forgetting the fact that even if Turkey is difficult, it is still beneficial to NATO. Turkey is literally part of NATO. NATO has always bent backwards for the US and the UK, and so Turkey feels neglected. It has been subliminally pressured elsewhere to cave to EU demands, even though it's not a part of the EU, to take in many immigrants and more. Turkey has its own agenda, own views, and own relations with Syria and Israel that have been completely trodden upon, chewed, and spat out by certain other NATO members, specifically the US. It is natural it feels neglected. It literally has been neglected and ignored, but that doesn't mean anyone is not welcome in NATO. U.S. certainly is welcome in NATO. U.S. is a difficult brat just as much as Turkey seems to be becoming, and that is okay. We are not all the easygoing people everyone likes in a crew or family. It is not our duty to be. NATO is not dedicated to a one-world government. It is dedicated to collective security for individual nations, each with its own agenda. Turkey benefits NATO and benefits its security and all of it, and is one of the most and is one of the oldest, most loyal members. Khan is encouraging very toxic behavior. It's very telling the rest of the world outside of NATO think very hard before joining it. Since even after 71 years of loyal service, it can be tossed aside like dirt. Okay, let me do this because I need to go ahead and start organizing. So we're going to call this the Greece argument. This was Greece argument. Cold War / historicity argument. And then we have the economic argument. So I didn't really see a rebuttal for why Greece is fine. I did see him take on his Cold War argument, and Pro hasn't even had his economic argument rebuffed so far. Yeah, we're gonna need to start keeping track of these. I would say the terror / expeditionary forces. All right, so far RM has a very solid lead. Let's go ahead and see going into round 3. Let me take another swig of my water because my throat is dry. So far, I think that Pro is crushing it. All right. Thanks, Pro. I'll start with my case. Hypocrisy. Pro's main objection to my framework is that it is hypocritical. Essentially, by holding Turkey to a high standard that other countries in NATO do not meet, I'm singling out Turkey for undue scrutiny. On the contrary, I'm willing to argue that the U.S., as a destabilizing force in the Middle East, imposes a burden on NATO that outweighs its contribution to the organization, but that is non-topical. It may simply be the case that membership in NATO comes with high hurdles, and that few countries are capable of upholding its goal of internationalized human security and liberal democratic values. If that's the case, then many countries shouldn't be in NATO. If the debate resolution were to change to on balance, the benefits of the U.S. membership in NATO outweighs the cost, I would still be con. Further, Pro doesn't provide much of a framework, so default to con sends any alternative. Ooh, that was strong, but RM, I think, can bite back on that pretty easily. All right, so I'll put that right there. Loyalty. Pro touts Turkey's long track record in NATO and demands NATO stay loyal to Turkey just as Turkey stayed loyal to NATO. Loyalty is not a reason to continue subscribing to a particular belief as a long stretch of time supporting anything. Whether it's the doctrine of NATO, the U.S. Constitution, or a sports team, it's negatory if recent events contradict the long-term support. Nixon could not argue at his trial that he spent a long time defending the Constitution, so his covering up of wiretapping was not grounds for impeachment. Strong. Further, the metric by which Pro assesses Turkey's loyalty is specious. Turkey's perceived lack of criticism of the U.S. war on terror is likely due to Turkey's continued geopolitical interest in Iraq and Syria. Turkey's incursions into both countries' sovereign territory subjected the Kurdish populations to protracted violence. Turkey's commitment to fighting terror is a facade for its nationalist agenda. You used the word. I love nationalism. After all, Turkey has actively supported ISIS for years by supplying military equipment, securing safe passage for ISIS members, and even training ISIS recruits. Its recent invasion of Syria freed 900 ISIS prisoners. Other countries that support the war on terror include Israel, which explains the relatively cordial, though checkered, diplomatic relations between Turkey and Israel. In crowd. Pro asserts that the countries not in the in-crowd of NATO will feel that they can be thrown out of NATO too. Turn this argument. Countries feel that their membership in NATO is unconditional, then following NATO's primary mission is no longer responsibility. Oh, that's good. It is supererogatory. For NATO to function as a security apparatus, there must be conditions on continual membership, lest countries run roughshod over them and pursue their own nationalistic agenda under the auspices of NATO. Second, Pro offers no evidence that smaller countries, particularly those that followed Greece and Turkey into NATO, would leave if Turkey were to be ejected from the alliance. Pro said himself that NATO provides security for these smaller nations. Okay. More strategy. Vague impact. Pro's argument here is not that different than their first place of refutation. Pro does add that Turkey will turn towards the Middle East and Russia if NATO were to kick them out, and that Turkey would seek vengeance in some nebulous manner. But this impact is threadbare at best. What kind of retribution should we expect? Without any degree of specificity, it is unclear that Pro's worst-case scenario would manifest. As it stands, Turkey's doubled trade with Russia, purchased Russian arms, joined the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, fueled Russia's war with Ukraine through its export of electronics, goods, and machinery, and spare parts, and secured $5 billion in aid from Saudi Arabia. It's unclear how Turkey could be warmer towards authoritarian countries outside of the West. If relations deteriorate further, pushing Turkey towards Russia and China, what will happen? Until Pro has a more specific answer, this impact is illusory. Ooh, that's strong. I would say that's an extremely strong argument. So I would say, let's just say, we'll give this the, let's just call foreign threats argument. That definitely goes to con. That's so good. All right. Turkey getting its slice of the pie. Pro contends that Turkey is only getting its fair share by coercing Finland and Sweden to lift its ban on selling Turkey military-grade weapons. On the other hand, I show how military support from NATO nations has been used to further Turkey's genocide in northern Syria. The erasure of Kurdish life is not simply getting one's fair share. Turkey is using its NATO membership as a bargaining chip to reap concessions from the reluctant Western military powers. These concessions fuel bloodshed. This is a net harm of Turkey's NATO membership in terms of security, liberal democratic values, and international respect for human rights. Turkey's military. Cross-apply the purges that reduced Turkey's military capabilities immensely. Over 20,000 military officials lost their jobs after Erdogan's purges. Also consider that Turkey's putative drone revolution was not the result of Turkey's military ingenuity, but of Western technology being retrofitted in drones. Okay, that's interesting. Let's take a look at that. The U.S. has struggled to curb Turkey, key exporter. Oh, that's big. Oh, Ethiopia. Like anyone gives a shit about Ethiopia. Interesting. Okay, fair enough. We need to explain why Turkey's military prowess is so important to NATO. Even if one buys that Turkey's military isn't important, what purpose does it play in protecting NATO? It didn't stop Russia from invading Ukraine, nor from annexing Crimea. On the other hand, Turkish soldiers were used to invade northern Syria and Iraq. Vague structure. I'm not entirely sure what Pro means when he argues that I'm misleading readers. Regardless, this is not much. There is not much new here. He does assert that NATO should be open to all. Security alliance should prioritize security, and ne'er-do-wells that undermine security ought to be removed, unless the other members be called to defend a so-called ally that drags others into international imbroglios of epic proportions. The U.S., UK, and alas, Turkey all do this. Hence, they should be removed from the security alliance. Conclusion. I think some weighing in is in order as we approach into the debate. First, I have to clear something up. This debate is not whether Turkey should be removed from NATO. Rather, the resolution asks whether Turkey's continued membership is beneficial or harmful to the security coalition. To the end, I argue that NATO's mission is undermined by Turkey's active perpetuation of an ethnic cleansing campaign. Crucially, NATO membership grants Turkey impunity. Ankara perceives the West needs them. Turkey's government is emboldened to pursue its nationalist agenda without fear of repercussions. Further, Turkey used its veto to strong-arm new NATO members to rescind their arms embargoes against Turkey, facilitating Turkey's genocide. I gave other examples of Turkey's strong-arming, including an incident involving the Incirlik airbase. I also gave examples of Turkey eschewing NATO's mission and instead of pursuing its own nationalist agenda, such as when Turkey supported ISIS. Pro argued that ejecting Turkey from NATO would push Turkey closer to the Middle East and Russia. As I explained above, the impact is illusory since this is already happening in the status quo, with Turkey being in NATO. Oh, that's big. Because that was the whole point of the economic argument, that they wouldn't want to trade with NATO. Okay, so this is slightly winning with con now. Let's see if Rational Madman can bring this back. Okay, Pro argued, okay, Middle East, okay. Pro suggested that other countries would think about leaving the alliance if Turkey were to be thrown out of NATO. It's unclear that countries currently being protected by NATO would feel the need to leave. Furthermore, without a mechanism to remove ne'er-do-wells, the security alliance would be nothing but a loosely tied bundle of countries without a common purpose. If, say, China, Russia, or even ISIS were to join NATO, there would be no more point in NATO existing. Even Pro's argument that Turkey provides NATO's second largest army is suspect, giving Erdogan's purges over the last few years. Moreover, Pro makes no attempt to demonstrate Turkey's military doing much to help NATO outside of a brief mention of NATO's military operations in his first constructive. Pro's impacts simply do not outweigh Turkey's ongoing genocide. I urge a Khan ballot. Summary speech. Okay. In Pro's understanding of the debate, Khan has been disproportionately representing some of the hypocrisy disqualification weighting as outweighing the hardcore benefits of keeping Turkey in NATO. In round two, Pro then chose to show you that the US in particular, as well as the UK, committing hypocritical acts throughout its aggressive war-based campaigns from the start of NATO to date. Since Turkey joined in the first war aforementioned, being the Cold War, it means that Turkey has contributed to the safety US and UK experienced thus far during every single war that we're in. The reason for this is that upon retaliation, Turkey always would be there to defend them from NATO's second largest army and a lot of raw equipment power that I provided links for in the previous rounds, and drone research is cutting edge for the modern time. Boom, straight to the point. Khan keeps speaking about a genocide, but as we can observe, if we ignore things like the US being responsible for Al-Qaeda and the Taliban and other side mission stuff in their wars, we're still left with direct body counts, such as the Iraq War, which would shock anybody, and lesser genocides in Afghanistan, and basically any country that the US has directly meddled in the Middle East. The biggest issue is that Turkey is better controlled as a NATO ally than as a rejected, vengeful enemy. NATO cannot just passively and peacefully eject its own long-term member without expecting a lot of vengeance. So, when we buy into Khan's narrative that Turkey is somehow the most evil NATO member, it is better to have this villain as an anti-hero than as an actual villain when it comes to the safety and even economic well-being of the EU and NATO members in general. Let's not pretend that T's willingness to trade heartily with the EU is discounted on discounting tariffs is also due to its NATO ties. Alright, that's big. So he would need to address that. So I'd say that Khan now has a winning argument again. Alright. The biggest issue at play is that Turkey is better controlled as a NATO... Okay, we already read that. Turkey is very much a nation that understands tit for tat or quid pro quo. It is not going to act out and do anything like its 1915-1916 genocide ever again. What an argument. This was well before it joined NATO. Back then, people didn't live that long. So that's actually over a generation, arguably 2 generations ahead of it joining NATO. What an argument. Meaning the people who led and did that genocide were quite literally dead or otherwise very elderly and redundant in Turkish leadership at the time Turkey joined NATO. Khan pointing out that Khan pointing out is also ridiculous because if Khan's actual case is one of historical hypocrisy, then what of the British Empire, the way the natives of the US were treated? Should Germany be ejected for the Nazi regime? Hail Hitler. The reason I don't want to keep delving deep into the hypocrisy of other nations and stuck to the biggest one in both sides of hypocrisy, even while in NATO, which is the US, is because I'm trying to show how irrelevant that is. NATO is a military arrangement. As long as there is actual democracy and such while in NATO, present in the nations involved, then honestly, what exactly is the 1915 genocide to do with Turkey's NATO membership or anyone's? There was all kinds of abuses by a variety of NATO members in Western Europe during their imperial invasions and maintenance in Africa. Can't bring outside information in the debate. The slave trade being one that the U.S. was involved in. Yeah, I'm not going to bring in outside information. Are we going to reject Portugal and Belgium, who are the founding members, on top of the UK and the US for their slave trade involvement? Just to be clear, there's more than 4 involved. If we were to follow Khan's thesis, we reject so much of NATO. This is the argument I was waiting for. That the only ones in NATO would be Eastern Europeans or a random nation or two that didn't do slavery and such in Western Europe. Then what exactly would Eastern Europe gain from it? They'd be better off siding with Russia, if anything, as most of them lack their own nuclear warheads, and therefore nothing is truly scaring Russia to be at the bay from blackmailing them, as it has just done the Ukraine for being outside of NATO. I honestly don't understand Khan's case. It's basically saying to eject the second largest army with a heavy loyalty to NATO for 71 years for no reason other than something it did while it wasn't in NATO. Well, they're doing this while they're in NATO. Like, what are you saying? In some troubles because its agendas is at times selfish and not entirely in line with NATO. There's no logic in ejecting nations for this. Just sends a signal that if one cares about its own interest, then even after 7 decades of loyalty, it's a very benefit to NATO, for NATO for having had it within. It can be ejected because it's not popular enough with the other nations and the narrative of it. Thanks, Pro. As we conclude this debate, I feel it's necessary to weigh cons and pros arguments to assess the resolution. And having done so, I feel the voters can agree the topic is negated. Turkey's military and trade. Pro advances that Turkey's military, geography, and trade make Turkey a valuable ally. Responded that Turkey's military was weakened by military purges and its dependence on military technology from the West. As for trade, Pro has not proved that Turkey would cease trading with Europe if it were kicked out of NATO. I presented in my first case that despite being blocked from the EU, Turkey still trades in EU nations. Nevertheless, it might reasonably be argued that Turkey's membership in NATO is expedient. Expedience, however, must be weighed against Turkey's genocide in northern Syria. Turkey's geopolitical advantages is that it offers NATO are used as bargaining chips to further Turkey's genocide and nationalist agenda. You really shouldn't be using this nationalist point, because I am a nationalist if you wanted me to vote on that debate. See my examples of A, Turkey supporting ISIS, B, Turkey cutting off power to the Incirlik air base. Yeah, a lot of these points were dropped. And C, Turkey threatening to veto Sweden and Finland's accession into NATO until they repatriated suspected PKK affiliates and scrapped their arms embargoes. The later is particularly important since NATO weapons have been used in Turkey's invasion of northern Turkey. No, that's a mistake. That's a big mistake. That's a big mistake, man. Northern Turkey, yeah. I remember the time when Turkey invaded northern Turkey, man. That was like the good old switcheroo. It's like you can't see the attack coming if you just attack yourself. It's like they fucking tried to swing for Syria and accidentally hit themselves in the face. While this debate is not about whether Turkey should stay or leave NATO, Turkey's genocide being bolstered by NATO weapons is definite harm. It undermines security by leaving a power vacuum that is being capitalized on by ISIS, especially since Turkey's action directly and indirectly support ISIS goals. Increases the number of internally displaced people in Turkey, assaults the liberal democratic values that NATO nations espouse. It constitutes an affront to international human security. Further, by threatening to veto Finland's and Sweden's accession to NATO, Turkey threatens to prevent NATO from getting new allies that could potentially deter Russia. Pro's only response to this argument was that the US and UK do this as well. That's a tu quoque. I agree, but the resolution deals with Turkey, not the US. If the topic asked whether the US or UK's membership in NATO was a net benefit to the organization, I would also be con. And I said as much in the previous round. Pro response to this point in their last round, arguing that under a standard I provided, the way misinterprets my standards, which would get more into genocide clear-up, most nations in NATO would be forced to leave. First, the debate is about whether Turkey's membership in NATO is beneficial or not. There is no grounds for removal of the resolution. Second, even if there was, Pro still has no evaluative framework to counter mine. He garners no offense at this point. That is no impact. And it could simply be that NATO's mission imposes a high hurdle to membership. I'm fine with that. If I have to decide between a NATO that supports genocide or no NATO at all, I think the latter would be preferential. Mind you, this is a non-topical. Harsh framework aside, its logic still holds. A global security pact not committed to protecting international life is hogwash. Turkey's vengeance. Pro's point that Turkey being ejected from NATO would cause him to seek vengeance is a ipsy dixit. Funnily enough, the resolution never asks whether Turkey should be ejected from NATO, only if Turkey's continued membership is a benefit to NATO. But taking Pro at his highest word, I still find reason that Turkey's vengeance will not manifest. First, Pro has yet specified Turkey will respond. That's very true. Given the immense cost of direct warfare, it is likely that Turkey won't resort to direct warfare. Should we expect sanctions? Maybe. But that's me putting together puzzle pieces that my opponent hasn't so much as taken out of the puzzle box. I can't assess the net cost of vengeance, only that Turkey will be angry, potentially side with Russia, China, and the Middle East. The latter is already happening. So it's unclear what would change under the resolution. Hence, this impact is illusory. In fact, Pro's own words betray him when he posits that Turkey is a country that knows tit for tat and quid pro quo. There we go. If Turkey's removal from NATO constitutes an injury, Turkey's tat will be proportional to the tit. On the other hand, my evidence directly supports a link between Turkey's involvement in NATO and the perpetuation of genocide, hence NATO membership is a net harm. Genocide clear up. I think I need to clear something up. Pro is bringing up the 1915 and 16 genocide a lot. The genocide I'm talking about is currently happening right now in northern Syria against the Kurdish population of captured territories. Hard perpetuated hundreds of years ago. Might be cause for reparations. Disgusting. You disgust me with that point. But that is neither here nor there. My framework never asked that countries in the security organization have a spotless track record of pertaining to human rights. I only ask that countries in the organization not sow destruction. When Pro says this, I honestly don't understand Khan's case. It's basically the rejected second launch for 71 years. It's something it did while it wasn't in NATO. I want it to be clear that voters that I'm not talking about the genocide from the occupation of Kurdish territories. I am talking about the genocide from the occupation of Kurdish territories. Turkey's invasion into Syria occurred most recently in late 2019 when former President Trump removed troops from northern Syria. conclusion, I felt that most of what's needed to be said was said. Pro hasn't really touched my points. He hasn't brought up NATO's ability to keep the peace between Greece and Turkey since the first round. That is very true. As such, most of Pro's cases either devoid of substantive impact or turned. Meanwhile, my point about genocide has not been appropriately responded to. Thus, I urge a ballot. Pro waives the first round. Okay, let's look at our document and let's see if there's any edits that need to be made. Let's take a look at the comments. It's not. I even read. That's not the Turkey's willingness to trade heartily with the EU, and you said that he made it in the first round. I'm not sure. Okay. Trade. I'm not going to delve heavily, but I do assert that Turkey. Okay, surrounding areas is something that would not if Turkey felt it had to side with Russia or the Middle East for its security needs. Alright, let's take a look. Right now, Khan would win. But honestly, I need to consider the economic point. So let me go ahead and add another point to this because, of course, they have to balance one another out. Who convinced me more? See, I honestly think that I agree with Pro, but I just think that he messed up as the debate went on. His arguments got weaker than the start. If I were to consider what they said, not my own external knowledge, he's saying that the economy will struggle due to the fact that they'll rely on others for security needs. He's saying that trade is already happening with other nations, and they're already relying on other needs. Wait, I believe it's in this round? Getting a slice of the pie. Shanghai Cooperation Organization. Let's look at this. Okay, so Eurasian political, okay, international. Okay, 40% of the world population. Origins. Dialogue partners. Egypt, Qatar, Cambodia, Turkey, Belarus, Sri Lanka. What does it do? Okay, origins. Activities, cooperation on security. If he just would have attacked this. The organization, cyber warfare. Security threat. Sure. Okay, organizations increase military cooperation, intelligence sharing, military exercises against terrorism. Okay, so it's like NATO essentially. Economic cooperation. List of summits. membership. Vietnam's interested. Oh, wow. Okay. Iran's joining. Oh, that's big. Pakistan, India. Pakistan and India in one thing. That's funny. Kyrgyzstan, Russia. Okay, interesting. Wouldn't this be a point against them, though? The only thing that seems to be keeping them from joining this is NATO. In crowd framework. There it is. Now let me go down and look at the military equipment. Lovely sighting. Okay, both. Framework. Winning over potential enemy. Okay. What does it support Turkish crimes? Turkey with the Kurds. Suitable for the Arabs. NATO's completion. Let me do this. Equipment. Weapon. Congress. Okay. Syria had raided a Turkish plan invasion. Green light to invade. Some troops. Public threats to invade Syria. Okay. Trump's targeted Syria. The Biden administration been pushing for a rush massive arms sale to Turkey. It does not require. Okay. Does not fly F-16s over Greece. Primarily from NATO. Due to the United Kingdom. Spain. Good Spain. Okay, he's American, okay. That's a very big point. Okay. What does he say about this? Turkey is NATO. Okay, paranoid hunch. Controlled beast committed potentially. This will determine the debate for me. I need to ponder. So, one thing is for sure, he did sufficiently prove that Turkey's military is reliant on NATO imports, but if that's the case, and Turkey has created all these extremely potent drones from Western equipment, then wouldn't it stand to reason that if Turkey got kicked out of NATO, because of course if it's not beneficial, then they'll be kicked out, right? Wouldn't that then suppose that Turkey could easily just, you know, leave, and if they do leave, they could devote that same technology to the Chinese and the Russians. But I know he's saying, "Oh well, this is not about kicking out," but like basically, it being beneficial means that it would be more beneficial for them to be in NATO than to be out of it. So if they're out of NATO, then they essentially have that technology they can just give, but they're already giving it to the Russians. You know, so that doesn't really prevent it either. It just cuts off their supply from the West. So that's like a very. Let's go ahead and take a look at his retrofitted drones. Okay. Turkey's generals. Okay, it was right near the Shanghai. $5 billion in aid, in crowd, hypocrisy, loyalty, vague structure, Turkey's military, retrofitted drones. Let's go up. Turkey's generals, okay, numerous times. Okay. Argues, okay, military officials, including hundreds of pilots, prestigious air force, abundance of advanced weaponry, okay. Russia. Funded by Turkish exports. Oh no. Okay, Turkey reported last year millions of dollars. According to survey data, at least 13 were exported, total 18.5 million worth of items. At least 10 Russian goods sanctioned by the U.S. for the. Oh, that's huge. So they're exporting. Did it say military gear there, just to be sure? American-made goods. Interesting. Beneficial. I can't bring in any outside information in the debate. I think it would be powerful to go into what would happen if they'd leave, like if they'd be kicked out. Rational Madman only goes for a domino effect, but doesn't really explain the intricacies of the domino effect. This is a very tough decision. I think this is about even, to be completely honest with you. This is going to drag on for a while. Wow, okay. That's a good debate. That was a good debate. I think, again, RM could have clenched this very easily if he just. I think that he just got a bit lazy, or maybe he had time constraints. Hmm. They're loyal members, such as Turkey. Well, this would. I wish he would have just, if he was gonna make an argument, go for like the Greece argument. I think I gotta give it to Khan, just mainly due to the fact that the military point, which I think is the biggest, point that he made, and the economic points are both countered because he's like, yeah, but they're trading with non-NATO countries, and they're even potentially joining that economic group, and they're at least communicating, and they're trading when there's NATO embargoes that actively hurts NATO interests. All the while, we're supplying them, which hurts NATO. But if only Pro would have taken the argumentation that perhaps, if they would, like, for instance, be kicked out of NATO, that Greece, would essentially be invaded, I think that would have been like a really good argument for the domino effect, right? And perhaps countries feeling more unstable with that. I think that would have been a really good argument. But I can't give it to Pro. I can't just like rationalize this point for him. I have to go ahead and boop. Okay, the very fact that this pressure we've been negotiating is immensely important. Cannot stand against Greece. Okay, let's go ahead and see. Speed and all that, but I must stall again. Okay. Oh, that makes sense. I will pump something out. Yeah, that's fair. Especially for being tired, RM, you did a really good job. Good debate, but I have to go and give it to Khan. All right, that's the end. GG. Khan, good debate. You guys did well. Good debate, RM. If you debate this again, I recommend going into the Greek point more, for sure. Now, here's my reasoning. All right, so even if we assume that Turkey is, a very important member for the fact of their boots on the ground and now their technological capabilities with drone warfare, they've gotten these technological capabilities and their equipment from the United States and from the UK and from other NATO countries, right? But here's the thing. They are still trading with other countries, and they're still shipping off important equipment to countries that go against NATO interests, all the while pursuing wars that are not in NATO interest. So it goes in the type of argument of, since you haven't touched the Greek point, unfortunately, that okay, well, yeah, they do have a big military, but we can't really trust to keep supplying them, because if they build a stockpile, then if they choose to just say fuck you, which they already may because they're already trading with all these countries, that they can be used against us. I'd have to say that the loyalty point, it could have been done better. But I think that generally speaking, he was right in saying that there needs to be like shown like a type of domino effect, right? That being said, yeah, but RM makes a really good point when he says that if we hold Turkey to the standard, then you gotta hold the U.S. to the standard as well. Oh, geez, it's such a good point too. But the United States, yeah, they used it for their own interests as well. Oh, this is hard now. Because the United States has supplied stuff that goes against Turkish interests too. So jeez, this is such a hard decision. I was about to give it to Khan, but Pro's case just made it even harder. Yeah, okay. This is such a hard topic. Yikes. This is really well argued. I have a feeling that Pro would have just swept it off the water if he would have focused more on Greece, but Okay, so let's take a look at his argument again. The untamed beast. Okay, committed. It's very T is not aligned with NATO treated. Okay, T gets kicked out. So being a wild card, Alcon has to do this. They just send a worldwide signal that will not only say they will not negotiate with Michigan prospect. Stands ball ways. Create U.S. Sicily. There's a facade. Support ISIS for years by supplying military equipment. Crowd. Throw it out if the countries failed their membership in NATO as unconditional. Use the military. Protecting NATO. See, I don't believe that NATO stands for, the neoliberal values and, all that. I believe that NATO stands for security, right? And the ability to, protect the nation states from, essentially the other side, which is, the authoritarian, countries in Asia, which I am sympathetic towards as an authoritarian myself. But the real question is, has Turkey done enough to say that they violated that security? Because RM's point that when they play ball, they play ball. Let's take a look. Okay, let's take Middle East and China. In fact, every single some way. Okay. Understood. Okay, well in need. Yeah, I have to give it to Khan. I have to. He didn't construct it because of his life situations, and that sucks, but it was so close. I'd honestly say it was so close. They give me made a few more points about Greece and trying to go ahead and show why the cooperation with Russia and the East in general is an advantage, and if for instance, they would stop it, it'd be good, but he hasn't done that. So, yeah, my final decision is for Khan. Thank you for tuning in.